Panic at the heart of government. Yes, suggestions that the government may be rethinking some of its key and most known about economic policies following a drubbing at the local elections last week. My name's Tom Harwood and this is GBN Originals. Now, the Labour Party lost. It lost a parliamentary seat, it lost a metro mayoral position, it lost almost 200 councillors, and it lost in the popular vote, the projected national share 10% behind the Reform Party. Reform winning, by some estimates, 30% of the vote to the Labour Party's 20%. Well, what does this mean for the government? Looking at this local election result, if it were to be projected for a national election, for a general election, of course it would deliver a Reform majority government. And it looks like the Labour government is not sitting on its laurels, is not just saying what it says on the television screens, which is that every midterm election is difficult for an incumbent government. This seems like it's something different. This seems like it's something more profound. Because it wasn't just the losses that we saw in those mayoralties, the losses that we saw in those councils, and the loss of that by-election too. But it was the near misses that perhaps have sent the biggest jitters up the spine of many in the Labour Party. The mayor of Doncaster was won by the Labour Party, but only by a couple of hundred votes. The mayor of North of Tyne was won by the Labour Party, but only by a couple of hundred votes. And the mayor of the West of England was won by the Labour Party, but running in far closer second than any poll had predicted was the Reform Party candidate Aaron Banks. Indeed, the polls had suggested that the Greens might win that seat. Instead, they came in third. No, it seemed like Reform did better than any pollster or pundit had predicted in those local elections. But what does this mean for the government? Well, it does seem that there are now going to be assessments made over policies that the government has been pursuing, not least the winter fuel allowance means testing, taking that winter fuel allowance away from millions of pensioners. It was one of the first things that Rachel Reeves did when she became Chancellor, and it has achieved what few policies achieve in the world of politics, and that's known as cut-through. Yes, voters up and down the country know about this policy. It has one of the highest recognition points of any policy this government has pursued. And that's damaging for the Labour Party because it's also one of the least popular policies that they have pursued. One of the most known about and one of the least popular, a toxic combination. Indeed, for the sum of £1.4 billion, the saving that the Treasury expected to make for this withdrawal of winter fuel allowances, the question mark is, has it all been worth it for the government? For that sum, for the amount of negative headlines that have been produced, for the amount of free attack lines that have been given to the Reform Party and the Conservative Party, well, it does seem that the Labour Party may now be second-guessing that original policy. Why? Well, according to a report in the Guardian newspaper, they may be looking to change that policy 9 months in from it being announced. What is known in the business as a U-turn. But will this U-turn happen, and how would they go about doing it? Well, of course, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has been throwing some water over these reports, has been suggesting that there isn't a full-scale review process, but that after the local elections, nothing is off the table. Make of that what you will. It does seem that he did not take the chance to deny that people at the heart of government are reassessing this idea of means testing the winter fuel allowance. It's something that, of course, has been a very potent political attack line, but it is also easy to see why the Chancellor thought that this would be an easy cut to make. It does seem, frankly, ridiculous to some extent that the richest people in the country, that multi-millionaires are given money for their winter fuel every winter. However, what wasn't accounted for is the many people who aren't millionaires who also had that money taken away that they were expecting just in the run-up to winter, when those energy costs are biting hardest, and as energy costs have risen over the course of the winter, unlike the cuts in energy costs that were promised by the government. No, that money off bills that was part of the election campaign from the government, well, they're saying it's not coming anytime soon.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cybercriminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GB News discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally today.
So this leaves us with a problem. People who are by no measure wealthy, not receiving that money to pay for their winter fuel, than that winter fuel being more expensive to pay for in the first place. How does that circle become squared? Well, one suggestion is that the threshold at which people are given winter fuel allowance could be risen. Indeed, that rising of that threshold could come in a relatively inexpensive way to give some of those pensioners who were expecting winter fuel allowances that money after all. Meanwhile, avoiding the imperfect policy outcome of actual millionaires getting money for free for their winter fuel. Could that threshold be readjusted? Well, that's something that Lord Cameron, David Cameron, suggested from one of his first speeches in the House of Lords after the Conservatives lost that election. Well, it could be a point of compromise, but of course it is difficult to pursue. And one further point to this is that the government hasn't done its sums quite correctly. There's been some suggestion that the Treasury has miscounted the amount of money that will actually be saved from withdrawing the winter fuel allowance. Why is this? Well, of course, £1.4 billion will be saved by not giving out the winter fuel allowance. That's completely fair and true. But one of the points of contention is that the government has been encouraging more people who are eligible for pension credit to then take out pension credit. Now, if every pensioner in the country eligible for pension credit withdrew that benefit, well, that would cost more than £1.4 billion. That would wipe away the savings that had been achieved through means testing the winter fuel allowance. That would plunge the balance book of pensions further into the red, rather than the black, which of course the Chancellor was attempting to achieve. It's a difficult position because the largest part of benefit spending of the DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions spend, the largest part of that is pensions. larger than benefits of other kinds. And that means that it is a fruitful place if the government is looking to save money. Indeed, looking at the way that the pensions bill is projected to grow, it is growing faster than the rate that the economy is growing. And so it's clear to see why the Chancellor has been looking at pensions as a bucket from which money must be taken if the government is to balance the books. Looking at the triple lock, for example, that idea that pensions must grow, the state pension must grow by 2.5% by average wages or by inflation, whichever measure is highest each and every year, has meant that the amount being spent on pensions has been outstripping economic growth in the country. That means that it's taking up an ever larger proportion of the pie because the pie is not growing fast enough. This is a quandary for the Chancellor, but not just for the Chancellor. Indeed, the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, has said that the triple lock on the state pension, a measure introduced by his own Conservative Party, is unsustainable in the long run if it continues to grow faster than the rate of economic growth. But there's a problem here for the Chancellor because of the contested nature of her winter fuel allowance means testing, those cuts, that withdrawal to millions of pensioners. It's meant that the government has now doubled down on the triple lock of pensions, saying how much more the state pension will rise each and every year, again, by those 3 annual measures, whichever is highest. And that leads to a big problem for the government, because that's going to cost more than anything that they saved through means testing the winter fuel allowance. That bill is still rising. Ultimately, the most elusive point of all of this is economic growth. If there was plentiful economic growth, these difficult decisions would not have to be taken. And yet our growth expectations have been cut by the International Monetary Fund. It looks like we are going to be getting less economic growth than was first expected, even at the most recent budget update, what the Chancellor called her fiscal statement, what the Conservatives called an emergency budget. So what happens now? Well, the government might well be thinking about raising that threshold, about restoring the winter fuel allowance to some pensioners on lower incomes. But then the question comes, how is this paid for? We're already at the very brim of the fiscal rules, the borrowing limit that this country has. That's why whenever there's a reassessment of growth expectations, of interest rate payments, whenever there's that sort of reassessment, there has to be another statement, more cuts found, more taxes raised, because we're at that very limit within the rules of the amount of borrowing that can be made. Of course, the rules, when they were introduced, were designed to not be at the brim every single budget. There's supposed to be a bit more headroom so that these decisions don't have to be so fraught and difficult every time that there is a fiscal event. And yet we are where we are. We're at the hilt, at the brim of that borrowing limit. And the government may now be spending more on those winter fuel allowances for pensioners on low incomes. So where does the money come from? Could taxes rise? Could cuts be found elsewhere? These are all decisions for the Chancellor to make if she wants to claw back some of that reputational damage done by her winter fuel allowance means testing. However, there is one final point to consider, and that is the ill-fated media catchphrase, the U-turn. Could it be that a U-turn on this policy actually, in the eyes of the electorate, shows a Chancellor who is out of her depth? Could it be that U-turning on one of the first decisions that Rachel Reeves made as Chancellor might actually be more politically damaging because it shows an oscillation at the heart of government, the idea that this government and this Treasury doesn't have a clue? Well, that's something to think on, and we will be following the developments and the decisions that are being made behind that black door to number 11 Downing Street over the course of the next months and indeed weeks. So do be sure to subscribe to the GBN YouTube channel to stay up to date on the twists and turns of this ongoing saga.